coordinate system and the understanding of coordinate systems are crucial for any work that involves geographical data. You have to know how to deal with projections, datums, coordinate systems, how to move from one to the other, and how to create data from something as simple as text files or CSV files that only list latitude and longitude, or if it happens to be a projected coordinate system, universal transits, Mercator, northings, eastings, anything like that. It is also very important that you understand how you represent these data in a GIS. After all, a GIS is a computer system, so we need to be very specific and explicit in how we store these data. If you look at your screen, this is a very simple representation of an Earth's coordinate system. This is a Cartesian plane. The line that goes from the top of your screen to the bottom is the y-axis. That on the Earth will be Greenwich Meridian or GMT, and the line that extends from one side to the other would be your equator. So that is also 0 degrees and is the only great circle for your latitudes. Now, how do we store these data? It's quite simple. Everything that is above the x-axis to the right of the y-axis or to the east of the y-axis has a positive sign. So in this case, everything is positive because the quadrant is to the right of the y-axis, to the east of it, and also above or to the north of the x-axis. One thing to note is that we normally give a location as lat and long, so in the transfer system at the very least. So if we have a transfer Mercator projection, for example, the y and the x will be swapped. So the plus x comma plus y will become plus y comma plus x. Now this is important for the South African system, so just be aware of that. If you now move to quadrant 2, here we still have a positive x because we're on the right of the y-axis or to the east of it. However, the y now becomes negative because we are below the x-axis, which is equal to the equator. If you're in South Africa, you know that. You're below the equator. You're also east of Greenwich. So x remains positive, y becomes negative, but for the South African purpose, it becomes minus y plus x because we have a transverse Mercator system or transverse cylindrical projection that we use. So if you are using South African coordinates, you must always ensure that when you do your transformations and when you import your data into a GIS, that your latitude actually has a minus side in front of it. If you don't do this, your coordinates will draw north of the equator. So they draw somewhere in Europe. Moving on to quadrant 3, which is now below the x-axis and on the west side or the left side of the y-axis, you'll see that both x and y become negative. This applies to coordinates in South America, for example. So if you have coordinates from South America, just be aware that both y and x, or both lat and long, will have to be negative. Then if you have the fourth quadrant, now you're looking at above the y-axis, and so y is positive, and to the west or left of the y-axis, so x becomes negative. This is related to locations in, for example, the United States of America or Canada. Here you'll have a positive latitude but a negative longitude. How does this translate? So these are your signs that you'll be looking out for. Very important. So plus, 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 minus. The quadrant 1, everything is positive. Quadrant 3, everything is negative. Quadrant 2, bottom right, your x is positive, your y is negative, so your latitude is negative and your longitude is positive. And then, of course, the opposite is in place for quadrant 4. And what you also need to remember is that you have to be east of Greenwich and north of the equator to be positive in all, west of Greenwich or south of the equator to be negative in all, east of Greenwich, south of the equator to have a negative latitude and a positive longitude, or west of Greenwich and north of the equator to have a negative longitude and a positive latitude.